Welcome to the Public Works Committee meeting for the City of Rapid City for Tuesday, September 9th, 2014. I'd like to start the meeting with a roll call and determination of quorum, please.
Estes. Doyle. Roberts. Scott. Wright. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Now's the time to adopt the agenda. If there's any committee members that would like to have anything added, deleted, or modified on the agenda. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adopt the agenda. Got a motion by Doyle to adopt the agenda as presented, second by Estes. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The agenda's been adopted. Now's the time for general public comment. This is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns or opinions to this committee on any item that's not necessarily on the agenda. Action will not be taken on any item that is currently not on the agenda unless it is placed on the agenda by a unanimous vote of the committee members present. I currently do not have any speaker request forms for general public comment. Am I missing anyone? Seeing none, we're going to move on to consent items. Consent items are 1 through 16 today on the agenda. This is a time for public comment on consent items 1 through 16. I currently do not have any speaker request forms for any consent items 1 through 16. Is there anyone I'm missing? Seeing none, we're going to close public comment on consent items 1 through 16. At this time, I will entertain having any of the consent items removed from the consent portion of the agenda for a separate consideration, or I'll entertain a motion to approve the items on the consent 1 through 16. Alderman Wright would like to pull number 7. Any others? I'll entertain a motion to approve the balance, except items number 7. Second. I've got a motion by Estes to approve consent items 1 through 16, except item number 7, and a second by Roberts. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 7. Oops, sorry about that. Item number 7 is a change order for number 2F to the Rapid Construction Company for Leland Lane and and Rushmore Street reconstruction for a decrease of $87,153.54. Chair recognizes Alderman Wright.
I have a question for our Public Works, and that is the question I had the other day on the 32nd and Dover site where they had their equipment and pipe and everything stored. It hasn't been reseeded, and I'm wondering why.
Chair recognizes Mr. Tech.
Thank you. Yes, the contractor's been notified that they need to get that done. We anticipate that will be done yet this fall.
I've got a motion by Wright to approve item number 7, second by Roberts. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Now is the time for public comment on the non-consent items. There are 2 items today, items 17 and 18. I do have one speaker request form. Mr. Tim Rogers, if you'd approach the podium, please state your name and your affiliation to the city for the record, please. And you've got 3 minutes to tell us your opinion and concerns on item number 17.
My name's Tim Rogers. I'm representing the West Dakota Water Development District. I'm chairman of that district. What I wanted to talk to you today was about the Canyon Lake sedimentation removal project that's tied with the dam reconstruction this fall. We've been West Dakota dedicated $100,000 to that project over the last 10 years. And what you'll see up here is kind of a spreadsheet outlining that, and I'll show a picture of the dam, what we're trying to accomplish. After we met with that, I became the chairman earlier this year, and I wanted to meet with the contractor and the city to see if our $100,000 was going to do the job. If you look off to the left, the area that we're really trying to hit is 260,000. Those are 2 priority areas, but if we clean out the whole lake, that would be 415,000. So I went back to my district and asked for another 50,000, and my district board indicated that we'd like to see that as matching funds. So that's what we threw out, and we brought this to the city council and the Public Works earlier this year. The Black Hills Fly fishermen off to the right are going to also offer 10,000 match. talking with Terry Walterstorff today, he indicated that there's a potential maybe for $60,000 match. What we were requesting is we were hoping the city could provide a $100,000 match so we can get closer to that 415. We're also helping the city trying to pursue a state grant with the Water Revolving Fund for $155,000 just to close that gap, so we can get the $415,000 to properly clean out the lake while we got it drained this year. Just to give you a little overview of the look of the data that I presented on that sheet. The blue areas are our first priority areas. It's the ones up by the blue is by the chop house and down by the dam. The yellow is public access areas that we would really like to get cleaned out as well. The white is kind of our bonus area that we're shooting to hopefully get extra state money to clean that area out. But with that said, in summary, my basic request is that in talking with Terry Walterstorff for the Public Works, he indicated he may be able to find $60,000 match. We would like to, hopefully you guys can find a $100,000 match so we can reach our goal to properly clean out the lake while we got it drained. It's one of those things you don't get cleaned out very often. It's 15, 20 years every time we approach this, and we kind of want to do it right this time and get it cleaned out. If you have any questions.
Thank you. When we get to this item, if you would stand by for questions from committee members, that would be fantastic. Thank you. I currently have no other further speaker request forms for non-consent items 17 and 18. And am I missing anyone? Seeing none, public comment is now closed. We're on item number 17. Item number 17 is an update on alternative funding sources for additional sediment removal for the Canyon Lake Dam reconstruction project. This was continued from the August 26, 2014 Public Works Committee meeting. And Mr. Terry Walterstorff is approaching the podium. Hi, Terry.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. Pauline's not here today, but we've been having a lot of conversations over the summer months here, trying to figure out whether the Vision Fund would have additional funding available for this matching fund grant and the additional sediment removal. And really what it's come down to is there's really no additional funding available in the Vision Fund. We did just approve a change order previous on the agenda here for some of the cost overruns associated with the delay in the project. That money will be coming out of the Vision Fund. But keep in mind there's still a couple projects that are outstanding out there. One in particular is the soccer field project, which will have a substantial shortfall on funding here probably. So in a nutshell, the Vision Fund really is not available. And to be quite frank, I was prepared to come in here today and tell you I didn't really have any funding sources available. But yesterday, as I was sitting in my office, spinning the wheels in my head, I remembered that we had a line item in our CIP fund that's called the Matching Grants Fund line item. We've used it for projects like the Mika-Seco Trail, the Rails to Trail project. Pauline did verify with me yesterday that there's about $100,000 available this year in that fund still. It has not been earmarked as a matching grant on any other project. Personally, I would feel comfortable utilizing about $60,000 to match the $50,000 from West River and from the fly fishermen. That would allow us to take care of, I'll put this map up again here. Essentially, everything that's in blue is currently in the contract already. We will remove the sediment in the blue area, so that's taken care of. The stuff in the yellow, if we can, and what I would propose to do is I will put this on the CIP agenda next week, Friday. I think that group meets again, and I'll request that funding. If that would then come back through the Legal Finance Committee. If that funding is secured, then we would have the funding to do the yellow. The stuff that's in white, which is actually the area we were originally kind of predominantly doing the sediment removal, that is where the sediment is a little thicker, but keep in mind that's also out in the middle of the lake that doesn't impact the public as much either. So potentially if we get the grant from the DENR, we could look at doing sediment removal in that area. One of the concerns with that grant, of course, is the timing. We won't hear on that grant until first or second week in January. So there's a possibility that the sediment would not be removed in that area if that grant, if they're done with the sediment removal and and the timing is just not right. But I do feel confident that with the $60,000, if we can secure that through the CIP fund, that we could take care of, I would say, the sediment that probably impacts the public most.
Thank you, Terry. So in order to clarify or just reiterate what you're saying, is that today we would pretty much just be acknowledging this discussion going to council for Monday night. You're going to take the possible matching fund CIP line item to the CIP committee meeting to get approval from the CIP committee before it comes back to council or Public Works at that point?
Those recommendations go back through the legal finance, I believe.
Legal finance, all right, thank you very much. But you're proposing to just, at this time, match the $60,000 to match the fly fisherman $10,000 and the WDD $50,000 for that. That's where you're coming up with the $60,000.
That's correct.
And for the state match, are you also thinking about the CIP line item if the sediment has not been completed as far as the removal come January, because that puts us back into 2015 at that point?
Well, my thought is that if we get the state funds, we have already allocated substantial funds that would already, I think, match the state funding. So we'll have already met that match from the state funds. So it's about $100,000 from the state. If we get that funding, we will just do an additional $100,000 worth of sediment removal.
All right, so so the CIP that you're going to take for the $60,000, if that goes through CIP and passes council, that's the only matching funds that you're recommending at this time?
That's what I would propose. There's going to be some areas in here that are going to be very difficult to do sediment removal on anyway. Up in this area, there's some springs. I think it's going to be pretty difficult to dewater and do removal anyway, but if we can secure that grant in a timely fashion, we could do most of these deeper parts here.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to acknowledge.
I've got a motion by Estes to acknowledge the report on the alternate funding sources for item number 17 and a second by Doyle. Mr. Estes, you still have the floor. Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for Mr. Wolterstorff, if I may. I know this project was designed and put together before your tenure here. My question for you is if you're familiar with why this extra sediment removal wasn't looked at the time the original project was put together. What were we willing to do versus what is being presented now is what I'm asking.
I don't know if Dale could add to that. I just think it's probably funding constraints, but Dale may be able to add to that a little bit.
I'll do my best. Actually, this project predates me as well, but a number of years ago there was a bypass that was put in the lake, and actually funding that was set aside for the dam reconstruction and sediment removal was used for the installation of that bypass to facilitate future sediment removal. So a portion of the funding that was identified years ago was used for the bypass, and I believe that was acknowledged by all the parties that had participated in providing funding for what was thought to be an imminent sediment removal project, but time's dragged on, and here we are a number of years later finally getting to the project. Obviously, the increase in construction price for the reconstruction of the spillway has reduced the amount of funds available for sediment removal, so that's kind of where we're at today.
Okay. I'll yield for now. Thank you.
Chair recognizes Alderman Wright.
Just to clarify, we're acknowledging the report and that you will come back to us after the CIP approval with your recommendation of ultimately what we should and can do in the appropriate language, correct?
Yeah, my hope is that if the CIP committee takes my recommendation, they will recommend allocating $60,000 towards this project. That recommendation will come through the next, probably not the next legal finance, but the following one,
okay.
So sometime in October.
Good enough, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, there is a motion on the floor and a second to acknowledge item number 17. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Item number 18 is a discussion on the sidewalk assessment for the Indian Health Services. This is referred from the September 2nd City Council meeting. Mr. Wolsterstorff, you're already up at the podium. Could you give us a brief outline of what was presented Tuesday night?
Well,
I'm
not sure
trying to
what was
think, were you
presented.
there?
I was not there, but here's what I will tell you on this
All right.
particular project, and I guess Wade needs to add on to or correct anything I say he can, but there's a different process for our reimbursement on this sidewalk as opposed to a normal assessment project. There's a process through the GSA department for getting reimbursed on sidewalks, so we will follow through on that process and do our best to get reimbursed by the federal government for this assessment work that we did. The project itself has been paid for. It was paid for as a CIP funded project. So project is paid for at this point. We're just doing our best to be reimbursed by basically all the property owners.
And I've got lights up here, so I'm going to defer my questions. Chair recognizes Alderman Roberts.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Terry, typically, how long does this process last? Do you know? To get reimbursed, if we do get reimbursed, how long is this process?
I have no idea. I've never gone through the process before. So,
Wade, do you have any idea?
I'm not sure I could really say. I haven't gone through the process either.
Thank you. I'd just like to, Wade Neidberg from our city attorney's office, just for the record. Go ahead, Wade.
That's really all I had to answer. I'm really not sure how long the process would take.
Okay, well, I guess we'll all learn together.
Yeah.
So, okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair recognizes Alderman Wright.
And for the record, I want to clear that the sidewalk is built on right-of-way of Canyon Lake Drive and not on federal land, correct?
that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Chair recognizes Alderwoman Doyle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And this is just a general statement. I'm not intending to chastise. I'm just concerned that with elected officials having 2-year terms and as much turnover as we've had in this city, we need some kind of system in place so that all of this information, when something has been discussed and vetted prior to our time, it's somehow linked. We somehow have access to this information, because to have that kind of an issue dropped on us at a council meeting when somebody in this city should have very well known what had gone on in the past. I mean, I just find that very disconcerting. So we need to talk about how we can make that happen. I mean, so that we know what was discussed. We know what kind of conclusions were drawn. We have some kind of, and that's the thing. Us as elected officials have no way. The public thinks we have access to everything. We don't. We can't go into the city's database and pull up whatever we want. We rely on staff. And if staff is just as new or newer than we are, then we have a problem. So we need to come up with some kind of solution. Obviously not to be done today, but we need to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you. Not seeing any further lights. I just had a couple extra questions. Terry, in discussing this going through this GSA project, as you said, the project's already been paid for. If the city does get reimbursed, obviously the assessment roll went through without this property. I believe that's what we did Monday night, is we removed this property from the assessment roll. If the city is going to be reimbursed, we would have to create a special allocation to put this on the assessment roll, or is that a separate billing process all on its own?
It'll be, I assume, a separate billing or an application process on our part. So if those funds, whether they're coming from the private property owners or from this federal government agency, those funds will be reimbursed back into the CIP fund where the project was paid out of.
All right, thank you. And then also part of this discussion from Tuesday night, and that's why I was looking at you quizzically, because I couldn't remember if you were there Tuesday night or not. This raised the question, in my mind anyways, I don't know about any other city council members, what does that do to the drainage utility fee, since this was brought up that governmental lands or governmental properties do not have to pay the sidewalk fee? What does that do with the drainage utility fee?
I will say the general rule is that the city or a state cannot assess the federal government property. They can't tax it, and there's been some court rulings that assessments are, even though they're for a benefit to the property, are sort of lumped together with taxes for the purposes of separation of the federal government and the state government. That said, there are specific exemptions where Congress has allowed state and local governments to assess projects to federal property, basically. So there is a specific federal statute that allows for drainage fees to be assessed. So there is an exception for that. That's been used in other states, and I'm assuming in other communities in South Dakota as well. But there is actually, Congress passed a law that said the federal government will pay drainage fees.
So we're not anticipating any issues to come at us, blindside us like the sidewalk one did.
I know I just sort of through Brandon Quiet that he's talked with someone from the General Services Administration, and they've already had a discussion about that. And I think he did a site specific for a couple of federal properties. So I think we're on the right track there.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Estes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just make a motion to acknowledge.
Got a motion by Estes to acknowledge item number 18, second by Roberts. Mr. Estes, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Just quickly, I agree with Alderman Doyle. It is kind of, we've got some of these projects that, I mean, that guy, obviously the gentleman from Susan had plenty of records, and this project's dated back to 2005 or 6. I mean, this has been a long thought out process. So it would be nice to be able to have, figure out a way for some of this stuff to follow these projects. But for right now, we'll see what you can do with GSA, and with that, I'll just, I've made my motion, I guess. I'll yield.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Alderman Wright.
Since I'm kind of a unit historian, at one time Public Works had a program called Project Tracker. Is that still around? That was what was used to track these things, so you might want to go back and see if that's still available. Another one that concerned me a little bit, it was I understand the letter was returned by IHS to us, and I would sure like to make sure that our staff, if they receive a return letter, especially from, I would say, a significant customer, that it's just not discarded. It needs to be followed up. And why did this letter come back from them unopened and rejected? I've heard that. I don't know if that's a fact, but I'd like you to check on that and let me know. Thank you.
Thank you. Just for clarification on what Alderman Wright was discussing is on Tuesday night's council meeting, and Alderman Wright, correct me if you understood it some other way, but the applicant from the Indian Health Services indicated that they never received notification of the sidewalk assessment and that it was returned back to city offices unopened. In other words, a registered letter, but it came back and it was stalled and was never reissued to another address or some other form of getting the information or notification out there. That's what was being discussed at the time. So just for clarification, unless anybody wants to go back and watch last Tuesday's council meeting. Thank you very much. I'll entertain. Oh, I do have a motion on the floor to acknowledge item number 18 in a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Got a motion by Estes to adjourn, second by Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you, everyone.